farming has always been a massive part of South African history for hundreds, if not thousands of years before even South Africa existed. And every single year we need to talk about the state of agriculture because it relates to employment, food security, it relates to wealth and prosperity in the rural areas of our country. And so let's get into our big interview. And I'm absolutely thrilled. I went onto Twitter and I said, who should I talk to about this? And it was like he had his own, what are the big fans? His own Tigers, his own Tyler fans. People were like, you have to speak to him. And so I'm thrilled to say that renowned agricultural economist Wandile Sihlobo is here. One thing I pride our show on is that the researchers and the writers get the biggest cheer on this show of anywhere they will ever be. Thank you so much for joining us. What is the state of South African agriculture at the end of 2024? Have we had a good year? Where are we? I know it's going into summer. What's going on?
Firstly, thanks, man. I committed on Twitter or X that I'll be here, and I'm here. Thanks for this. Look, where are we today in South Africa's agriculture? I would say we've had one of the toughest seasons. We were hard hit by the midsummer drought. The year started excellently. Agricultural seasons usually start around about October of each year. And then farmers will be busy. You'll see as you're driving across South Africa that it will be brown. People are tilling the land. And we started excellently. But somewhere around about February and March, that's where we were hit by the drought.
Okay, yeah, so I, as someone who knows nothing about farming, I've got the hands of somebody who has done no manual labor in their whole lives. That's rude, but thank you. I need to know what is out of the norm. And I think a lot of us watching are like, okay, so some years there are animal disease, some years there are droughts. What is out of the norm? Like, is climate change having disruptive effects on our environment? And is it causing unexpected things to happen?
For sure, Dan, but I think the key thing perhaps maybe a starting point as to where is farming in general in South Africa. I would say the best benchmark point is, say, start in 1994 up until to today and say, has this farming sector been growing or shrinking? What's the story? If you look then and you compare to where we are today, we've actually more than doubled in value and in volume terms. But what's interesting is that the area that we farm has actually declined over that period, which means that we are doing a lot of things right in terms of improving productivity. When you think about the structure, though, of the South African farming, we have roughly about 36 agricultural commodities that we produce and export. You can categorize them as livestock. Some are categorized within horticulture, fruits and vegetable. We have a lot in the basket there. And then you have a field crop. The challenges of climate change and everything else, those are a big issue for us. But what we are doing better as a country is that we've applied a lot of focus and investments on technology to use better seeds, to use better genetics so that we can cope with these difficulties.
I see. And whenever there's technological progress, I have to think, are workers losing their jobs? And employment, and particularly seasonal labor, a lot of it is seasonal labor in farming, is a hot button topic because many people in rural areas don't make a lot of money off of being farm laborers. And there's a lot of talk about how to transform farming so that there are more black, or at least people of color, people owning farms and managing and running farms. The government has tried to do interventions over the last 30 years or more for like redress. What is the state of farming as a place of labor and transformation?
I mean, I think if you read any of the government documents, they always say, even myself, we say, look, let's put all of the focus on agriculture because we want to create as many jobs as possible. If you ask today to say how many people are in primary agriculture, we have about 935,000 people in primary farming, so close to 1 million.
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. And when you add then those that work in a value chain on processing of the products and everything else, we have around about 350,000 people or so. So give or take, you can say in the South African labor force, 6 to 7% is within the farming. But what's interesting though, Dan, is that 1994 to today, we've actually seen employment in agriculture holding on nicely, even with that technological improvement.
Interesting.
So folks are still working. Wages have also increased somewhat, so we're sitting at a reasonably better environment.
And in terms of black-owned farms?
Black-owned farm, I mean, I published a book, I guess I'm advertising, called A Country of
You can advertise, Wandile. We give him permission to push his book. Nobody reads. We need to do things for books, guys. We need to get people reading. Okay.
So then the book is titled A Country of Two Agricultures. One of the key things on that was the fact that although we talk about the sector having more than doubled since 1994, if you were to look at saying black farmers, how much do they produce at a commercial level? They're still producing roughly about 10% of that. And what's troubling about South Africa is that that 10% commercial production by black farmers hasn't changed since the 80s, 70s, and the 60s.
Days.
Since apartheid days.
Okay.
But over the past 30 years, we've also spent a lot of money trying to deal with the transformation things, but we're just not getting what we're supposed to get out of that.
So interventionist projects are not succeing in creating.
Not succeeding.
Sure. Why do you think that is the case?
I mean, I do want people to buy the book, so.
I brought you here for answers, Wandile.
But I think then the key thing is this. Look, man, the challenges are both on the private sector as well as on a government.
For sure.
On a government side, there's an issue with land reform on the financing side,
sure,
as well as on a skills basis. But also the private sector has to be open to partnering on some of this. What has happened in South Africa, which is interesting, is that since the period between 2006 up until to today, much of the land that the government has bought under what is called land redistribution, our land reform has about 3 legs: restitution, redistribution, and tenure.
Yeah.
Under redistribution, the government has accumulated about 2.5 million hectares of land. 2.5 million hectares of land, to get a sense of how big it is. With all of our grains and oilseeds that we produce in South Africa, we are producing them in about 4.5 million hectares. So that gives you a sense.
Wow, okay, that's a lot of land.
That land has not been transferred to black South Africans with title deeds.
Why not?
But that is what now is going to happen, that the president is going to be doing.
Okay.
And I think once we begin rolling that out with title deeds to people, rolling it out with a financing instrument, ensuring that youth participates on that, we may see those numbers changing in terms of the ownerships and the outputs on the sector.
Now, you know the thing about South African politicians making promises is the deadline keeps getting outsourced further and further and further down the line. When can we expect this 2.45 million hectares to actually be given out? He's
actually not lying, because the first targets were in 3 years after 1994, and then they continued. Now we are looking at 2030. Look, the key thing is that should happen at any moment now. My hope is that over the next 4 years, that's what will be happening. But what's also interesting is that there is now a criteria to select who benefits on land.
Brilliant.
And the important part of it is that 60% of that, 50% of that land has to go to women. And then about the next, if you look another tranche of about 30%, it has to be young people.
Cool.
And of course, we consider everyone, because we still have an issue of young people who want to get into farming for commercial purposes, but just unable to jump in.
Super interesting. And Wandile, I think a lot about how a lot of the project of apartheid was to ensure that black South Africans were forced to work for white companies. And the way that you do that is you remove food security from within black communities. You use taxation and other means to basically make it not enough for black South Africans in their communities to be able to grow and live off their own land and their own food. And a lot of the legacy of apartheid since has been trying to redress that. So what are we doing or not doing, succeeding in or failing over helping people do subsistence farming and small-scale farming, not necessarily going huge commercial, but making some money off of the land that they have and the farming that they can do?
I think this is where we've been failing on saying, how do we make agriculture to be sustainable? Because the agricultural sustainability doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a big farmer, but you have to be able to do well this year, supported, so that maybe after 2 years you can then stand on your feet and grow and harvest by yourself.
Sure.
And I think there's been inefficiencies within the state side, both on the spending, but also on what we call the agricultural extension officers, which in the olden days used to be effective. The folks that go to various villages and teach people how to farm, what to apply when, we used to have those. Do you know the Transguy, the former Transguy?
Yes.
Yeah, they used to have something called Traco.
Okay.
It used to be very effective. We need that across South Africa today.
And then, okay, so the government's not providing that sufficiently, but you also said funding or spending. Has government also got programs to give people money to start?
Look, both of these don't need to be only by the government. Government and the private sector have to take action.
But it's not happening.
On this. It is happening, but not at a scale that we want. And I mean, there are examples of projects that are succeeding well. You think about in the Free State, we have something that is called SENDEF as part of the Sonic Group. In the Western Cape, the Detroit have something called PELS. All of these are geared towards helping communities and Black South African to get at a commercial level. What we need to do now is to study those and then replicate them at a high level. And you know what the government has at the moment?
What?
And private sector also buys in? It's an agriculture and agro-processing master plan.
Okay.
We just have to implement it.
Okay. And how is John Steenhuisen doing?
I think he's doing pretty well. He is talking to farmers. He is adopting the master plan and applying it. And I'm really hopeful that he's actually going to make some inroads, because right now there's a sense also of continuity on some of the plans that have been there. Yeah.
Sure. Don't you guys feel so much smarter now? So much more knowledgeable? Round of applause, Wandile Sihlobo. That was outrageous. Wandile, thank you so much. I don't even mind that he plugged his book. It's called The Country of Two Agricultures. All right. Thank you so much to everybody for being here. That is our show. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back on Monday for the next episode of The Dan Quarter Show. And remember, you can watch all of our episodes absolutely free on enca.com. Have a gorgeous week, South Africa. The box won. Good night.